everyone! Yeah, we're finally back with more Fat Electrician. I do love learning more history, especially about effective individuals or interesting individuals, which Fat Electrician goes over mostly war heroes. So it's always good to learn more. Because even as someone that used to watch the History Channel, they only covered so many people like Admiral Nimitz, which, funny enough, in Texas we have the Admiral Nimitz, basically Pacific War Museum. If you ever get the chance, look it up and go see it. It's really fun. On another note, yeah, we don't usually get to learn about all these different people, which I'm a little sad about. I wish they taught this in more school, but they're too busy trying to, they're too busy trying to deal with all the BS of teaching us, getting us ready for whatever kind of standardized testing that we have to do. Hello, killer! Hello, everyone. It's your favorite wolf. Maybe. Hopefully. Mech Wolf here. In his free form.
This guy's probably the only dude to ever get shot in the face and benefit from it.
Wait, what?
Today we're talking about the most gangster general of World War II, Terry de la Mesa Allen, a.k.a.
Okay.
Terrible Terry. A
The
nickname
one-star
given to him
general.
not by his enemies, but by his fellow high-ranking officers for
Oh.
failing out of West Point, scamming his way through infantry
Wait,
officer
what?
school, and being a poor disciplinarian. Terry Allen did not care about the dog and pony show side of the United States military. He didn't care if his men called him general or sir. Most of them
He
just
didn't care
referred to
about
him
all
as
that stuff.
Terry. He did not hound his men about uniforms and grooming standards, and he certainly did not think of himself as above his men. He considered himself
One of them.
He gambled with them, he drank with them, and he fought with them on the front lines.
Honestly, those are usually the best kind of generals, because the men say, we're going to follow this man into death. Because that guy right there, he's one of us. Hello, Warrior of Light. Let's see which one you like the most. Tell me which one of what. Anyway. On that line, yeah. You just can't. Like, there are a few times where history teachers do get the chance to do that. Like, this one history teacher I had in high school, who basically described to me how World War I was started by a sandwich. And that's a pretty, interesting way to start a class, I'll be honest. I do wish we would get more chances to talk about this kind of thing, but yeah. Generals that are fighting right beside their men, or just commanders in general that fight right beside their men, the soldiers know, I'm going to follow this guy because he's been with it through the thick of us. He is one of us. I do like that he's basically no BS and just... Well, I don't really care about all the oily stuff as long as my boys get their due.
Legendary war correspondent Ermi Pyle describes Terry Allen as one of his favorite people and the true soldier's general. Another war correspondent described him as
amazing.
The greatest leader of men and tactical general in our army. While his
Goddamn.
contemporaries described him as, and I quote, a soldier of uncertain future in peacetime army, but certainly should be entrusted with a division in a time of war. Terry Allen was a rare case of a high...
That is a hell of a thing to say about him. But yeah, soldiers that are... Generals or any kind of commander that are with their troops all the time, hanging out with them, especially when there's actual battles going on and actually leading them from the front, that builds rapport, that builds morale, that tells them, I'm one of you. I am going to fight and die with you, and I am willing to do so. That is... People don't realize how important that is. It's one thing if men follow orders. It's one thing if they want to follow orders. Because they trust you. It's completely different. It's another thing. Yep. Sorry, I'm getting my words confused today. I haven't eaten much today.
Officer being more concerned about the opinions of the men below him instead of the men
above him,
and it
which is
infuriated many of his fellow generals, despite that
because they don't care.
Overwhelmingly effective on the battlefield that
so they couldn't get rid of him.
Refused to go into battle without him. He was so
overwhelmingly
popular with the men that served beneath him and war correspondents that he actually ended up on the cover of Time magazine in World War II.
Oh my God!
That 99% of you have probably never heard a single thing about him.
Never.
Today we're gonna fix that right after a word.
I would gladly.
This video is brought to you by Ridge Wallet. Okay, look.
Was it started as a soldier who fought in the front lines, worked his way up. Maybe Napoleon saw him as one of the best generals of all time. Yeah, those really are the best generals. The one that quite literally willing to go into the dugouts with their men, be with them, and care about what the men think about them. Because there's a lot to say about a guy that you're willing to follow hell into and back. That's something else.
Like the 10th time we've gone over the Ridge Wall
Protect
on this
Wall
channel,
from
I'm not gonna
play.
keep kicking a dead horse.
Protocol
Okay? Pretty
3.
much all you need to know is they keep
I
paying
mean,
me to make these
that's
ads,
normally
I'm
what you
assuming
should do,
because
but it's more
people
like
keep
Protect
buying
Platty
them,
for
and
me.
people keep buying them
Pop
because
shotgun.
it's a good product. Okay, look, all it is 2 pieces of metal with some elastic. It holds your credit cards and your money together, and then you put that in your front pocket so you're not sitting on top of a giant Gutenberg Bible for the
There
rest
is
of your life messing
I
with
will
your
say
back.
this,
Okay,
there
look,
is
it's
a lot of
2025. We all have
great
a smartphone.
soldier
There's no
stories
reason to
in
be
World
carrying
War
around
II.
100 different business cards of
Like,
every person
amazing.
you've
On the
met over
Pacific
last
front,
25
on
years,
the
and
European
origami
front,
inside of a dead cow and carried in your pocket at all times.
like, just
Okay?
in
Just put
general.
their phone
Not only
numbers
just from
inside your
soldiers,
phone,
just from
and then
regular
carry your
people.
ID, your
Like,
credit
from
card, and some
repairmen.
cash, and you're good to
There's
go.
some
Not only
crazy
that, but
stuff.
This works for women too, okay? I don't know what your life is with the purse situation if you're a woman, but guess what? My wife has like 5 different purses in 5 different sizes, a different size purse for every type of occasion, and I cannot tell you how many times she has forgot her credit card or her ID at home, and it's been a giant pain in the ass, okay?
Damn.
So take all the important shit, put it in a Ridge wallet, and then you just throw the Ridge wallet into whatever
Where is the
purse you're using
platypus?
for that day.
I think he's
and you're
asleep
good to
right
go.
now.
And it doesn't just stop at wallets. They make pretty much everything that you would carry in your pockets on a day-to-day basis. They've got key organizers, they've got cell phone cases, they've got pocket knives. Now that I brought it up, they're probably going to come out with a purse. And the best part, they've been in business for 12 years now, and they're having a huge anniversary sale where you can save up to 40% off your entire order. So I'm going to have a special link down below. You can check it out. Let's get back to the video. All right, our story begins April 1st, 1888. A young Terry De La Mesa Allen is born in Fort Douglas, Utah. Terry Allen was not only born on a military installation, he was basically bred to be in the military. His father was Colonel Samuel Allen, who served 43 years in the Army. And his grandfather on his mother's side was Colonel Carlos Alvarez De La Mesa, who fought in the Civil War at Gettysburg. Terry grew up his entire life on military installations in the West. The first thing this guy learned how to do after he learned how to walk was to ride a horse, drink, chew tobacco, gamble, and shoot the shit like an enlisted cavalry soldier. By the time he was 10 years old, he was basically in the United States Army because he went to work with his dad and followed him around every single day. So at 19 years old, Terry goes off to West Point. He becomes pretty well known for basically 2 things. He's phenomenal at riding a horse and doing anything that actually involves like combat, being a soldier out in the field. And he's absolutely horrible at everything else and shows no motivation to improve upon it whatsoever. He racks up. He doesn't care about that. He cares about what's going on. His uniform's never perfect. His fingernails are always.
He doesn't care about the paperwork, the showing off of being a soldier, the pony shows and whatnot, which a lot of militaries still have to do nowadays, especially. But he just didn't care about that because that's not usually involved with being out in the field.
He's always drinking in class. He's cheating on exams. The exact type of
drinking in
class
class
you expect from a child that grew up his entire life with enlisted men out in the field.
Yeah.
Because of this, he is not very popular with his classmates because, well, it's the 1900s, and at this point in time, the officer class is still very much that same aristocratic class from, you know, the higher society.
The hoity-toity.
Terry Allen isn't taking their dog and pony show very seriously, and on top of that, he also has a very severe stutter when he talks, so everybody kind of like gives him shit and makes Because of this, at the age of 21, he ends up getting kicked out of West Point. Not taking no for an answer, he goes and enlists in a Catholic university, graduates at the age of 24, enlists in the Army, and then competes for a slot to be a cavalry officer. And he wins. He ends up getting commissioned about 5 months after his class.
But they have Gundam? No. Or they have guns? No, I have not seen that. Maybe we'll watch that today.
At West Point. From there, Terry is pretty much immediately sent to the southern border between the United States and Mexico, where he is tasked with stopping smugglers and gun runners from crossing the border. He gets in frequent skirmishes, and this is his first taste of combat. And when he's not doing that, he has to go and, you know, intermingle with his fellow officer class and their hoity-toity aristocratic society nonsense. And obviously, Terry's still not super popular. He's still rough around the edges. He's still kind of disheveled. He's got dirt under his fingernails. He likes to drink. He likes to cuss.
He likes to be with the men.
But Terry does gain some popularity because you know what the hoity-toity officer class likes doing? They like playing polo. And you know what Terry's really good at? Riding a horse, which comes in handy when you're playing polo. Terry ends up becoming one of the best polo players around and ends up
I have never played polo in my life. That is a very rich person thing. Even for people that own horses, polo isn't much of a thing, especially nowadays. Like, you have to be rich to play polo.
regional champion team, and they're supposed to absolutely crush Terry's team. But Terry doesn't care what's supposed to happen. Terry wants to win regardless, so he makes
he
his
doesn't
team
care
go
what's
out
supposed to
and
happen
practice for weeks leading up to this game. And for practice, he has them shooting goals on a target that's only 1 yard wide, when the average polo goal is 8 yards wide.
If you can dodge a ring,
Which you can dodge a ball. What?
So
Dear
Terry
God, I
essentially
remember that
overtrains his
movie.
team, and when that game comes around, the
Yes, he got
regional champion team takes 40
Yeah, golf is a
shots
lot
at the
easier
goal.
than
they
polo.
Only make 7. Terry's team only takes 8 shots at the goal, but they made all 8. And this is the first glimpse we get to see at Terry's leadership and his mentality of how to get shit done.
Yeah.
This goes on
Fortunate
for a
shot.
couple years, and then World War I kicks off, and Terry wants to go off to war. Unfortunately, his current unit is going to stay right where they're at the southern border. So Terry volunteers for overseas duty, so he essentially just gets backfilled into any open slot, which unfortunately happens to be in a supply company. So he's going to go overseas and just carry supplies up
from
to
one
the
place
front
to
line
another,
and not actually need to
logistics.
fight on the front lines. But that's
Which
not
is
what Terry
important
wants.
still.
Terry wants to be on the front lines with the infantry. The problem is he can't really do that because he's not an infantry officer. He's a cavalry officer. So Terry comes up with a plan.
And that
he
is?
just shows up to an infantry officer graduation ceremony.
What?
And hops in line.
What?
Gets to the front of the line, and the
Oh my
commandant
God.
looks Terry up and down and is like, I don't recognize you. And Terry looks the dude dead ass in the eye and goes, I'm Alan. Why don't you? And the officer is kind of taken aback, like, am I the dick here? Do I really not remember this guy? Who knows who
I do love that he is so confident in what he's saying that he gives the officer that's awarding this question and pause. He's like, did I really just forget one of my own men? One of the own graduates? Like having that much confidence in a lie really just, it gives other people pause. Like, holy shit. That's great. I can't.
my entire course, and he's just like doesn't know what to do, so he just hands Terry the certificate and sends him on his way, and Terry is now a temporary major and infantry officer. So Terry ships off to World War I in charge of an infantry battalion. Once there, Terry partakes in the St. Mihiel offensive and the Battle of the Meuse-Argonne, literally the biggest battle that America has ever fought in ever. And while he's there, Terry is tearing shit up, okay? He is on the front lines fighting with his men. He ends up getting wounded 4 separate times. The first time it happens, he wakes up in the aid station, looks around like, what the fuck is going on? Sees the medical tag around him with like all of his, you know, vitals and all of his BS and everything that's wrong with him. Rips that off and goes back to the front line. Another one of his injuries comes when Terry is shot in the face. Not only does Terry survive and go back into combat, but he actually benefits from getting shot in the face because for some reason, it cures his stutter.
What? How does... God must have been on his side with that bullet, because that must have... An angel must have directed that bullet just to help him a little bit more. What the hell? How is that even possible? I just don't understand. That's one of the rare moments where you have to go, someone in heaven has to have been on your side for that
this
one.
This is really where we start to see the most gangster general start to come into play, right? Like getting wounded on the front line with your men and returning to combat before the
pretty
doctor
normal.
says you can. Pretty gangster.
Yeah.
Getting shot in the face, surviving, and then returning to combat. Very gangster.
Yeah.
But getting shot in the face and having the old adage, what doesn't kill you make you stronger, actually
Quite literally.
Survive, you not only return to combat, but you
Praise
show
the Lord
back
and
up
pass.
suddenly
Praise the Lord and pass the ammo. That's actually pretty good. But yeah, it's pretty cool to go back immediately even before the doctor says you can. It's really cool to do that even after getting shot in the face. It's insane for it to actually have aided you. As he said,
better is undeniably the most gangster shit that's ever happened.
Crazy.
As World War I continues to go on, Terry gets more and more comfortable in combat. This is where he really thrives, and he's starting to get a lot of ideas of his own. And one of the things he comes up with is like, why the fuck are we fighting in the daylight? You know what I mean? Like, let's fight at night where nobody can see shit. It's pure chaos, and Americans thrive in chaos. So one day, Terry is ordered to take a position, and the estimated casualties of taking this objective are going to be like 200 to 300 men. So Terry is like, fuck that. You know what we're going to do? Instead of attacking tomorrow when we're supposed to attack, we're going to attack tonight when it's dark. Okay, now at this point, that's not how you conduct warfare, okay? Not a lot of people are launching night attacks in trench warfare, but you know what? Terry just showed back up after getting shot in the face, and now he speaks better. Fucking, I'll follow that guy into any amount of combat anywhere, and that's
if I get nearly as lucky as him.
Except for one company commander. This company commander is like, no, we can't do that. We need to follow orders. We need to do exactly what we're told. We can't attack at night. You're going to get us all killed, yada, yada, yada. Finally, Terry just gets fed up of hearing this dude, pulls out his pistol, and shoots him through the ass cheek.
What?
Terry then looks at this company commander and says, and I quote, "There, you're out. You're wounded."
You're welcome.
Company commander
What the hell?
Station, his XO takes over. They launch this night attack.
What the hell, man? You can't just shoot the company command. What the hell? Alright. This is some crazy ass. I don't even know anymore.
Objective, and they only lose 20 men. So night combat was outrageously effective for Terry and his men, but shortly after that first night combat, the war ends up coming to an end. Terry would later go on to write, and I quote, "I wish the war hadn't stopped when it did. It's a damn shame. I was just beginning to get good ideas about commanding infantry battalions. I wish I could go back to the front and try them out."
Well then,
armistice is signed, World War I is over. Terry ends up staying over in Europe until 1920 as part of the occupation army, and somewhere along the lines, he ends up, playing polo against the British, and then he ends up, being friends with some of the British officers. And he has this one officer that he ends up being pretty good drinking buddies with.
And who is it?
This particular officer's name was Edward VIII, as in like
the
Prince of Wales and future King Edward VIII. Terry had no fucking idea until after the fact. Terrible Terry in World War I literally scams his way into becoming an infantry officer, successfully leads an entire battalion into combat.
This is insane.
Earns a Purple Heart, gets shot in the face that fixes his stutter, and then becomes drinking buddies with the fucking King of England.
This is insane story. This is straight out of like a comic book or something. Because this is all insane. Like, oh, I suddenly got shot. Now I'm much better at what I'm doing. I want to be a cowboy, chapter 3, huh? Well, this is only going to get more insane as it goes, so let's hear it.
So Terry returns to the United States, loses his temporary rank of major, gets busted back down to captain. He didn't do anything wrong. This was just standard practice. He only had the rank of major because it was like a time of wartime. That's what had to happen. Yeah. So Terry gets back home, gets settled in, and then in 1922, he gets called into his boss's office, and his boss, this colonel, explains to him that there's this famous rodeo promoter named Tex Austin and the Cattle Association, and they want to put on a competition between an actual cowboy and a cavalryman, because there's been this huge rivalry between the two at who's a better horseman for like 100 years. They want it to be a long-distance, 300-mile race where each rider is only allowed to use one horse. So Terry asks the colonel who's going to compete for the army, and the colonel says you are. Yep. You're going to win. And he's going to be competing against his legendary cowboy known as King.
Listen, of course the army would try to send their best guy out there just to do this sort of thing, because they want to prove that they are the best. They want to prove that they are the best around. So of course they're going to get the guy who's been doing this forever, who has the best at being the cavalryman. Exactly, and they tell him, you're going to win. Dear God.
When he was a former wagon boss in the Old West, he's just a complete legend, and everybody is expecting whoever the army puts up to get absolutely.
That's why they send him in, yeah.
And that's why it's a cattle congress and a rodeo promoter putting the whole thing on. They want to show that cowboys are better than the United States military.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they don't know that the U.S. Army has Terry Allen, and he's the main character. So the media and the newspapers hype this up. The entire world is watching. The very first day, Terry...
Here's the funny thing. Thanks to Buffalo Bill's Wild West Rodeo Show, there is actually a lot of people in Europe that learn about the cowboy and later on would lead to more cowboy movies being produced and shown in Europe. But yeah, there is a big fervor of like the cowboy legends back in Europe.
50 miles and the cowboy barely hits 30. Terry's getting telegrams and updates on the race of where he's at, where the cowboy's at, how many miles are left to go every single night. And Terry is so far ahead the entire time that by the third day, he decides that he has time to stop at a diner and have breakfast. The waiter, striking up casual conversation, asks Terry if he's heard about this crazy race going on between the legendary cowboy Key Dune and
Japan loves the cowboy legends. That's because the cowboy legends, especially with some of the stories, if you didn't know, They're very parallel to some samurai Ronin legends. It's basically, you know, the stranger rolls into town, stops the bad guys, you know, stops the evil, then leaves without more than a word happening. It's similar how we have the Magnificent Seven and the Seven Samurai. Quite literally, you can see some parallels there. Because quite literally, it's people get their village getting harassed, they call in a bunch of people in order to pay them.
I'm sure the army guy is really good, but he doesn't stand a chance against a real cowboy, to which Terry informs him, well, first off, my name's Terry Allen, I'm the army guy, and last I checked, I'm pretty far ahead of him. The restaurant ends up paying for Terry's breakfast for him, and then later that day, Terry receives a telegram that Key Dune ran into trouble and he couldn't get feed for his horse one night. Now, on one hand, that's good, because Terry's definitely going to win now, because this guy's horse might actually die without getting the proper care.
Oh, no.
But on the other hand, not exactly how Terry wants to win, so Terry sends a telegram back saying that they need to send an army car with feed and water and everything his horse needs to Key Dune.
That's pretty
exactly
nice.
What they do. They keep Key Dune in the race just so Terry can beat him fair and square. Okay, this is a double win. It's actually genius.
It's really
Terry's
great
part, because on one side he gets to look like a class act. On the other side, he's preemptively shutting up all the typewriter warriors that are going to be like,
oh, he lost.
He only won because that guy didn't get feed for his horse. It was
Yeah.
a fluke. A real cowboy's still better than army cavalry.
Yeah.
No, Terry's shutting all that shit out of the gate, and
He wants to immediately show that he is the best,
exactly
and even show that he's willing to help.
By over 7 hours. For the rest
Crowd
of
at the Alamo.
Between World War I and World War II, Terry is pretty much just training and really defining the doctrine for what a cavalry soldier is supposed to be doing on the battlefield. You have to realize at this point in time, warfare on horseback is outdated, but nobody really knows that yet, right? Like, they're going to get replaced by tanks and trucks, but World War I, tanks were just introduced. They were
slow, could break
down. You could pretty much just drive straight. They didn't have radios inside of them. They couldn't coordinate attacks. So a lot of people didn't understand the real potential with mechanized warfare. So a lot of people were still under the impression that horse warfare was still going to be very prevalent.
That's why we still had cavalrymen, or that's why the French still had cavalrymen even during the onset of World War II. Because, well, they thought it would still be on there, and then again, the French army at that time had a lot of problems. But anyway, sorry, a friend keeps needing my help with something.
He then went on to write a literal book about it that got published in the 1930s called Reconnaissance by Horse Cavalry Regiments. While all that was going on, he served as the assistant commander in 3 separate divisions, where it was said that he, and I quote, succeeded in convincing all of his charges that they were the best outfit in the army.
Damn.
Again, this speaks to Terry's unorthodox but truly exceptionary leadership skills.
Alright, the big red one.
1940, Terry is promoted to Brigadier General. 1941 rolls around, the attack on Pearl Harbor, America enters World War II. Terry's getting fitted up for war, and then in 1942, he is promoted to Major General and put in charge of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. So Terry shows up to the first ID, assumes command, and then he meets his second in command, a man that is just like him. He is rough around the edges. He does not care about the dog and pony show that is the United States military at higher ranks.
That is great.
And he also cares much more about the men beneath him than the men above him, and that Major General was Theodore Roosevelt Jr., a.k.a. Teddy Roosevelt's son. So wow. Get to work, getting the first ID ready for battle. The first thing they do is flip the entire script on its head. Terry actually becomes friends with all of the men beneath him. They don't even call him General or Sir. They literally just end up calling him Terry. Terry doesn't hound him about having a prim and proper uniform all the time.
He don't care.
Terry hounds him on is that their weapon is absolutely spotless and that they're doing their job. Unlike a lot of other high-ranking officers, Terry doesn't micromanage all of the officers and NCOs beneath him. Terry realizes that he has a very zoomed-out, bird's-eye view of everything that's going on, and the men on the ground that are actually seeing individual problems up close have a much better idea of what's going on and how that problem needs to be solved.
It's also important for logistics.
Picking the right men for the job, telling them what he wants done, and then letting them figure out how to do it. By November of 1942, Terry, Teddy, and the
that's kind of amazing. That's not something they thought about very much back then. Like, it's quite literally something that was invented around this time. Having your troops actually learn. It's really insane. Like, having them be problem solvers, because commanders, or any rank, no matter what you are, because In any second, the person's rank above you can be killed. You have to be able to solve problems and be able to think thoroughly about them in quick situations. So this is very good.
1st Infantry Division are going to partake in Operation Torch, the Allied invasion in North Africa, particularly Morocco and Algeria, and the 1st Infantry Division is tasked with taking over a major city with an airfield known as Oran. November 8th, 1942 at midnight, the 1st Infantry Division makes its amphibious landing into Algeria, and everything goes absolutely textbook. They see a little bit of resistance, but not much. They overcome it almost immediately. Oran's about 25 miles from the beachhead, and they have to clear all of that distance on foot, rucking and carrying all their gear with them.
Those high components. There's the old saying of be wary of men, old men in positions where young men die often. Because they've seen some shit. And they know some shit.
Distance until they come across a town called St. Cloud, where all of the forces had kind of regrouped and fell back to this town in fortified fighting positions, and were waiting for the Allied forces to come in and fight them. At this point, Terry's got to consider what he actually wants to do here, because he could send in all of his men, clear out the entire town, kill all the enemies,
but that could take a lot of casualties.
But he's going to be putting his men in harm's way, and there's nothing of strategic value inside of St. Cloud. His objective is to take over the city of Oran, and he doesn't need St. Cloud to do it, and he's not going to put his men
just
in
go
harm's
around
way
it
for no reason. The next thing he could do is bombard it with artillery, but there's a bunch of civilians that live in that town too, so that option is also out. So Terry takes one of his battalions, fortifies it, and has them surround the town so the enemy can't get out, and then watch a counterattack later, and continues to move the 1st Infantry Division towards the objective. Okay, this is brilliant. This is literally what the Marines did in the Pacific Theater with the island hopping strategy, except Terry is doing it in North Africa with entire towns. Now remember, this is 25 miles they have to walk to Oran, carrying all their shit after landing on a wet beach, probably being soaked. Okay, this is going to be a jaunt and a half. It's going to be exhausting, and it's going to take time. The 1st ID moves all through the night, all through the day of November 9th, and Terry is pushing his men to the point of exhaustion. On the morning of the 10th, Terry is up on the front line with his men after everybody's been walking for a day and a half, and as he's patrolling the front line, seeing how everybody's doing, he comes across this utterly exhausted rifle company that's taking shelter inside of a ditch next to a road because there's some stray artillery fire coming in. So Terry walks through the ditch, gets on the other side, and he's standing, and he can see the city of Oran off in the distance, and he's looking around, he's looking at the faces of his men. He knows they're exhausted. The men are looking back at him like, okay, here it comes, we're about to get our ass chewed because we're taking a break. Fuck. So Terry looks back at the city of Oran, and then he looks back at the men, and he says, and I quote, "There's a lot of good-looking girls in that city ready to welcome the liberating Americans."
What the hell?
Where did that go?
And with that,
for those that don't know, that's from Battlefield Bad Company. I'm not sure if it's Bad Company 2 or 1, but it's a fun game.
men got up, reinvigorated, and continued towards the objective. Again, Terry showing his expert leadership, being able to get the absolute most out of his men when shit sucks. One of the men that served under Terry later described his leadership style as something along the lines of, he always wanted to achieve the objective, not because he was worried that he would get in trouble or get chewed out by Terry, but because he genuinely did not want to let Terry down, because he respected him that much.
And that proves how much of a good leader he is. To the point where your men aren't just following orders, but do not want to disappoint you because of how much trust and how much they like you. There is, like I've said before so many times in this video, people underestimate how much of an effect that has on someone. On how soldiers fight, how they will fight, how they're going to fight. It's kind of insane, really.
So they go. They cleared 25 miles. They take over the city of Oran. They achieve the objective. And as a reward, Command decides that Terry Allen is supposed to hunker down in the city of Oran and piecemeal out his 1st Infantry Division to support other elements.
But you can't do this to me.
At this point, Terry's pissed. He thinks he has the best infantry division in the army.
So they're splitting him up. He doesn't like that.
Piecemealing out his men to play support roles for everybody else. He thinks that he should be up on the front lines charging towards the enemy. And this goes on for months. The entire time, Terry is raising hell with his chain of command, and his chain of command just simply isn't hearing it. And after 3 months go by, Terry's finally had enough. He goes over all of his boss's heads and goes straight into General Eisenhower's office, looks him in the eyes, and says, and I quote, "Is this a private war, or can anybody get in?" General Eisenhower, impressed by Terry, issues a command to reassemble the 1st Infantry Division and get them into combat, infuriating all of the officers in between because Terry just went over their head to the big boss. So now Terry's
they're pissed because he's actually doing what he wants for once, and the boss agrees with him. They didn't want it. They didn't want him to know about it. Why good commanders want to make a good relationship with their soldiers. That is the most important thing. Like, it shows a lot, especially if you ever read 40K. And read the Caiaphas Cain books, he goes over that. He's quite literally said, you'll be spending a lot of time with these men. And they've all got guns, so I don't understand why anyone would try to rile them up. It's good to build a rapport with the men.
Back, all of his men are under his command, and what he decides to do is he wants to start getting them trained and ready to go into combat. He gives them extensive night fight training and gets them ready for combat with like the couple of weeks that they have. Early March, Terry gets an order that him and the 1st Infantry Division are supposed to go take over a city in Tunisia known as Gafsa, about 45 miles away from Oran. Terry needs to have the entire division moved into place on March 16th, just north of the city, and then on the morning of March 17th at first light, they are going to attack and take over the entire city. So Terry does just that. They arrive on the 16th, exactly where they're supposed to be, and that night, Terry says, you know what? Fuck it. We're gonna fight at night. Terry essentially defies orders of fighting at first light when the enemy can see and launches a surprise attack that night. The 1st ID takes over the entire city with minimal casualties. The first thing the next morning, Terry's boss, a guy by the name of General Patton, shows up because he wants to see the assault take place. Right as the sun's coming up, General Patton storms into Terry's headquarters asking what the hell's going on, why don't I see any movement, why aren't you attacking? Terry nonchalantly informs General Patton, battle's over, I already have all the objectives.
Let me hear you say it. Let me hear you say, good job.
Oh my god.
Good, job.
Well, now Patton's not pissed off.
Listen, everyone loves to try and do that to their boss. Quite literally say, tell me good job, come on. Come on, and you know you're just pissing them off.
Met. Now he's pissed off that it wasn't met exactly how he wanted it to be
met. Patton was a bit of a stickler for that shit.
At this point, Terry casually asks General Patton, do you know who Newt Rockne is? At which point, Patton responds, yeah, what the hell does a Swedish football player have to do with war? If you don't know, Newt Rockne was the guy that popularized forward passing in American football, so Terry explains to him, the night attack is essentially the forward pass in the infantry. Telling Patton, and I quote, why would I beat my brains out for 1.5 yards when I could just pass the ball for 40 yards? At which point General Patton says again, and I quote, oh, and then he fucking leaves. From here, Terry and the 1st ID are ordered to help the Allied forces take over the next city.
Patton was also an interesting general. If you ever look up I don't think the History Channel does it anymore, but they usually do World War II stuff, where they talk about General Patton's legendary run, but they don't talk about it as much anymore. They're too busy with shows that aren't involving history. But, you know, I'm not bitter at all. I'm not annoyed that I can't watch history like I used to do as a kid.
Again, they launch a surprise attack, taking over all the preliminary objectives, and from here, they experience heavy German resistance, a ton of counterattacks. They're getting strafed by the Luftwaffe. They're getting hit by artillery. It is an absolute shit show. After a couple of days of fighting, Erwin Rommel sends in a bunch of heavy tanks to punch through the American
yes, the Desert Fox.
Line, and they are making a beeline straight towards Terry's headquarters, at which point Terry is ordered to fall back, to which he responds to his German command, I will like hell fall back, and I will shoot the first bastard that does. And the 1st Infantry goes on to repel the attack. That very same day, Allied intelligence cracks the German battle code and they intercept a radio transmission saying that the attack is going to resume at 1600. A little bit later, they intercept another transmission that says the attack has been postponed until 1645. Now, to most people, this just seems like good information.
They're going to go on a
counterattack. We can, you know, be ready and defend ourselves when this attack comes. But to good old terrible Terry, he sees a unique opportunity to fuck with the enemy, and that's exactly what he's going to do. So Terry waits until 1615, 15 minutes after the initial attack was supposed to take place, and then he orders his communications unit to send a transmission on the German radio frequency that says, and I quote, what the hell are you guys waiting for? We've been ready since 4 p.m. The 1st Infantry Division.
Have a nice day, and thank you.
Okay, I don't think you guys understand how beautiful this really was, okay? It was like an onion of go fuck yourself. There's so many different layers to it. I mean, for one, It's just funny. 2,
Yeah.
it demoralizes the enemy because now the enemy
They know.
knows that we've intercepted their communications, we've broken their battle code, we know they're coming, and we're
they're
not
freaking
scared.
out.
And 3, the story of this happening spreads through the front lines like absolute
Of course it
wildfire
does.
and increases morale like crazy. I mean, could you imagine being a frontline soldier? You've just fended off the infamous German blitzkrieg by Erwin Rommel, and then your good old buddy, your boss, Terry, essentially pulls his junk out, lays it on the table, and asks Erwin Rommel if he wants seconds because he knows that his boys are going to fuck him up if he does. You'd be absolutely pumped going into that battle.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened because they stuffed him in the pocket again. At which point, none other than General Patton comes strutting into Terry's headquarters again with a smile on his face and says, and I quote, "Terry, when are you going to learn to take this damn war seriously? The battle continues until April 6th until they've achieved all of their objectives."
Oh, dear God.
After this, the first ID is tasked with basically going around Tunisia and cleaning up all the remnants.
All
They're
right.
going around following Terry's command. Terry's launching night attack, day attack, night attack, staggering back and forth, keeping the enemy guessing. It's absolute chaos.
Nice.
And the first ID just mops the floor with the enemy. The entire time, Terry and Teddy Roosevelt Jr. are on the front lines telling their men, like, okay, once we clean up Tunisia, we're going to go back to Oran for some R&R. We're going to have a bunch
All right.
of fun. We're going to beat up every MP in town while we do it. Now, while
Beat
this
up
is
every
going on,
military
General Terry's
police.
starting to get a lot of publicity in Time magazine and the newspapers back home, and Patton is all over PR, right? That dude
Yeah.
thrives on PR.
He
and
loves
he's
it.
starting to kind of like get a little bit jealous that Terry's starting to attract some of the
Ah.
spotlight. Time magazine actually called Terry the best commander of an infantry division in the United States Army.
Yeah, Patton's
And
not gonna like
the next version
that.
of Time that comes out, General Patton gives an interview where he describes the combatants of El Guitar, aka the 1st Infantry Division, as a bunch of freshmen. Terry, noticeably
Wow.
fucking furious because he's insulting
Yeah.
his precious 1st Infantry Division, calls him out.
Don't
on
make
it.
fun
Him
of
and
his
Patton
boys.
Get into a back and forth. Patton calls him tired, and they get in this big pissing match. At
Oh,
one point,
boy.
Patton actually ends up showing up to Terry's headquarters in person while Terry and the first ID are clearing out the rest of Tunisia, and walks in, they're talking, and Terry kind of asks, looking around the HQ, there's, you know, some foxholes dug, and he asks Terry, which one's yours? And Terry points to his foxhole, and Patton walks over and takes a piss in it. At which point, Terry's bodyguards click the safeties off their Tommy guns, and Patton realizes, oh fuck, I might have took this too far. And Patton scurries out of Terry's HQ and fucks off. So he's absolutely not getting along with his contemporaries and the men above him in the chain of command, but at the end of the day, he really doesn't care what the people above him think about him. He wants to get the
Yeah,
job done.
the
and
boy.
take care
Here's
of
the
the
problem.
above.
The boys care about care about their general. So you just piss them off for a guy that's basically saving their lives and loves them to death. It's like you pissed off the family, so the sons are taking their safeties off their guns.
And that's exactly what he's doing. He's not going to let some big name talk down to his men just so they can get more press. But it's not just Patton. Omar Bradley also does not really like Terry Allen because Omar Bradley shows up to see how the first ID's doing, and what he notices is unlike all the other infantry divisions that are, you know, eating cold food out of a can, every time he shows up to the first
They're
ID
eating warm
front lines,
food,
their
and they're
chow
good.
halls are full of fresh beef because apparently they fucking found some on the battlefield.
Found
And
some.
this was apparently a big deal because they were all ordered to not eat the local livestock for fear of getting people sick, but also like just fucking cook the meat. People have been doing this for tens of thousands
Yeah,
of
that's
years.
how
It's
you do
worked
it,
fine the entire time.
more or less,
General
but-
Terry's gonna bend the rules to get his guys some warm food and take care of them because that's just the type of guy he is. But
Yeah.
Omar Bradley interprets this as him being a poor disciplinarian and being lax on all the
Oh my
policies.
God.
So Omar Bradley doesn't really like him either. Regardless, the first ID finishes clearing out the rest of Tunisia, and then they go back to Oran for some much-needed R&R.
Everyone is a Listen, in a war place, everyone's his family. You're not just fighting for the people back home. This is something I've heard from my aunt and uncle. You're fighting for the guys sitting right next to you with that foxhole. Because they're the guys watching your back. They're the family right there. Yes, I have an aunt and uncle in the Marines, and damn, do they tell me a lot of stories like that.
So the first ID shows up in Oran, and this
I wish I
shit
could go talk to
kinda
them again,
hits
but
the
they
fan
live somewhere
because
else
the
now.
first ID took this place over a couple of months ago, and since then the second wave of American forces has kind
They're
of
retired, but-
taken it over and essentially turned it into a major.
But as they have both told me, there is no such thing as a former Marine, so
military installation, right? You've got all your administrative people, you've got your supply people.
They
they're
tell me
all
that
going
every
around
time
across
that I ask
lanes.
about
These
it.
guys have never seen combat, they've never seen the front line, and when the first ID shows up, they're informed that combat soldiers are not allowed to go into the bars and officer clubs inside of the cities.
Pardon me, young man. Excuse the shit out of my goddamn French.
This, rightfully
Excuse the
so,
shit.
does not sit
Yeah.
well with the 1st Infantry Division. Like, motherfucker, I'm the one that took this city over and
Yeah.
fought the Germans. You showed up after the fact, and now you're going to tell me I can't go into the bar? Absolutely
With
not.
my
You
boys.
go fuck yourself. So there's
Yeah.
a bunch of fights, there's a bunch of partying. On one occasion, General Allen is sitting down at a restaurant having lunch when he sees one of his soldiers with the big red 1 patch on his arm getting into a fist fight with a couple of different soldiers in their Class
Oh.
Bs, at which point Terry stops lunch,
Gets
goes
up.
over, breaks up the fight, tells his sergeant, like, hey, sergeant, knock this shit off, yada, 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 goes back to eating lunch. A couple minutes later, fight breaks out again,
of
same
course.
exact sergeant. Terry gets up, now he's pissed. Like,
Yeah.
Terry's a cool guy, doesn't want to chew you out, but if he gives you a direct order,
Do
you
you
better
want-
fucking listen. So
Yeah.
Terry grabs his sergeant, and he's like, Sergeant, I thought I told you to not fight. And the sergeant looks at Terry and goes, General, you didn't hear what they said about the 1st Infantry Division. They said we couldn't fight our way out of a wet paper bag. At which point Terry
Oh.
looks this NCO in the eyes and goes, all right, get back in there. And then he go back and eat his lunch while he watched this NCO beat up a couple of paper pushers. So it's definitely a shit show going on here, but by the time all this
All right, go get
information
'em.
reaches Eisenhower, all he sees is the word riot written on a piece of paper. He calls
Oh.
Omar Bradley into his office, chews Omar Bradley's ass. Omar Bradley
Goes
basically
down to
blames
Terry.
all of it on Terry Allen,
Of
saying
course he
he's a
does.
poor disciplinarian and that he's not doing a good job manning his men. So Omar Bradley basically hatches a plan that he's going to try to get Terry Allen relieved of command. The problem is they're about to go invade Sicily, and despite
Oh.
the fact that Terry Allen and Patton don't really like each other,
They're
Patton
working
finds
together.
out that they're going to not let the 1st Infantry Division partake in the amphibious landings at Gela,
What?
at which point Patton says,
What?
no, I need those 1st Infantry sons of bitches. I won't go without them. So General Patton
Here's the
essentially-
thing. Like, they do the dog and pony show shit where they're both, like, going back and forth and having a little pissing match. But even Patton will begrudgingly tell that these are good soldiers. And he's not willing to just waste them and throw them in the back line. You gotta admit, that's at least some good
keeping
foresight.
Terry in the fight, not because he likes him, but
But
because
because-
he recognizes that he needs him, because
Yeah.
Terry Allen is that fucking good. So July 10th, 1943,
He knows he's good.
Operation
You
Husky
don't just
kicks
get
off.
rid
The
of a good
amphibious
officer.
landing in Sicily, and the 1st Infantry Division is landing at Gela, and they need to take it over. It is heavily fortified, and it is a tough fight the entire time, but Terry gets his men, and they establish this beachhead, and they start moving forward. On the second day of fighting, Terry's back at his headquarters, and Teddy is out on the
Sicily
front
was
line,
heavily
and where
fortified,
Teddy's
so-
at gets overrun by Hermann Göring's tanks. They attack with 60 German tanks. At
Oh,
this point,
damn.
Terry doesn't have any tanks to send to go fight him, and he doesn't have enough anti-tank in his infantry to be able to do anything. So Terry, thinking fast, orders Teddy to have the men bed down, let the tanks roll right over the top of their fortified positions, and
Oh.
then, once the tanks are past them, fight off all the infantry that's going to be coming in behind
Wow.
them. That's exactly what they do. But now, Terry still has to figure out what to do with the 60 German tanks, making a
It's
beeline
eagle fighting,
straight
yeah,
towards
pretty
him.
much.
So Terry sends the order out to his forward observers to get ready to call in for naval gunfire, and then he orders his artillery to lower the guns and, I quote, slug it out when the tanks come. And
Oh.
that's exactly what they do. Teddy and his infantry on the front line fend off all the German infantry, and Terry's artillery and naval gunfire takes out all the German tanks. By the end
Damn.
of that day's battle, Terry has lost a ton of men. His line is fractured. He's still got guys all over the place trying to hold on desperately to key terrain
God.
features. He's hurting bad, and he still can't get tanks up there. At this point, Terry realizes he needs to pull a Sun Tzu. He needs to appear strong when he's at his weakest, and he issues a single order in
And that
all
is-
caps. The division attacks at midnight.
Oh.
That's exactly what happens. At midnight, they open up with naval gunfire and artillery. The 1st ID launches their night attack, catching the Germans completely off guard. And once the smoke settles, they realize that the Germans were gearing up to launch a major offensive the very next day. But the 1st ID and Terry Allen beat them to
God
it, wiping them
damn.
out and capturing all the objectives by sunrise. Terry Allen and the 1st ID have saved the day. However, we can't say that because we don't like Terry Allen because he takes care of his troops. So rather than crediting Terry Allen, Omar Bradley
Yeah,
shifts the credit
to
and gives
Patton.
it to Patton
Yep.
because it's technically Terry Allen's boss, saying, and I quote, General Patton's insistence on having the division for the assault may have saved the 2nd Corps from disaster.
This is
Yep.
a load of barnacles.
After
Yeah.
that, the 1st ID is ordered to go take over an airfield. They do that almost immediately, and from there, there's another super hard fight that they're going to need the 1st ID for at a
And that
town
is?
called Trenoa, which is part of the Edna defense line, and it absolutely has
All
to
right.
be captured. The problem is it's a mountainous town in Sicily that's described as being so hilly that it would tax a mountain goat, and there's a bunch of Germans in there that are heavily fortified and
Yeah.
ready to fight. So Terry and the 1st ID show up, and this is a hard fight. But Terry's in command. He's shifting soldiers around, forcing the Germans to shift their soldiers around, causing the Germans to expose a weak point, at which point Terry would attack.
They take full
he just
advantage.
out-finesses the German command at every possible turn, and the First ID takes over the town in 6 days. And then holds it while the Germans desperately launched 24 counteroffensive towards him, and he stuffed every single one of them.
Damn,
In the
that
midst of the
many?
battle, as it became apparent that Terry Allen might actually pull this shit off, 2 other generals, General Wyman and General Huber, showed up as observers. They then proceed to sit back, watch Terry Allen and the First ID out-finesse the Germans at every conceivable turn, take over the entire town in 6 days, breaking the Edna defensive line, and then, once the battle was over, they informed Terry Allen and Teddy Roosevelt Jr. They were both being relieved of command under the orders of General Eisenhower and General Omar Bradley.
Oh,
And the reasoning
boy.
for it was essentially what it was back in Oran when they planned the entire thing, saying that Terry Allen was a poor
Yeah,
disciplinarian,
yeah,
and
all
because
that
of that,
BS.
the 1st Infantry Division had become too unruly. So the entire 1st Infantry Division is absolutely furious. They
Yeah.
absolutely love their fighting General Terry Allen. Terry Allen
course they
is
would be.
absolutely furious because, well, his career is essentially over and he is being
Yeah.
shipped back to the United States. Ironically, just 2 days after he is officially relieved of command of the 1st Infantry Division, he ends up on the cover of Time magazine,
God
praising
damn.
him as the best fighting general in the United States Army. And now he's been relieved of command and is getting sent back to the United States.
And he hates
you have
it.
to understand, in World War II, when you were relieved of command and
You
sent
were
back to
basically
the
a
United
pencil-
States,
put
like, that was
to a
it. You
pit.
were done. You were
Yeah.
going to be in charge of like a training facility or some bullshit. You were never going to see combat or
Yeah.
major warfare ever again. This is the end of Terry Allen's career.
The Timberwolves.
So Terry makes it back to the United States, doesn't really have orders, he's on rest and recuperation, and after 7 weeks, he receives a letter from General Eisenhower that says, and I quote, "I'm certain that after you've had your well-deserved rest from the battlefield, your experience and courage will command your assignment to equally, if not more important duty." Apparently, while Omar Bradley and Patton don't like Allen,
Eisenhower
still
does.
and he's the top dog. Because of this, both
So they have
Kennedy
to listen
and
to him.
Roosevelt are given a second shot at command. Teddy Roosevelt Jr. is famously sent back overseas, where he partakes in the first wave landing of U.S. Beach during D-Day.
Normandy.
Terry Allen is sent to Oregon, where he assumes command of the 104th Infantry Division, a.k.a. the Timberwolves.
Oh.
Terry assumes command in October of 1943, and for almost a year, he trains this unit to get ready for combat. They train all over the country. They train in Oregon. They train in California. They
All
train in
different
Camp
temperaments,
Hyden
all
for
different
desert
kinds of
combat.
limbs.
They are ready for absolutely anything. And the
Yeah,
entire
that
time,
makes perfect
Terry Allen
sense.
dedicates 35 hours a week to night combat. And the
Oh.
Timberwolves become the first ever U.S. Army unit to specialize in nighttime operations. September 1944,
I guess that's why they're
Terry
called
Allen
the
and
Timberwolves.
make their way into northern France, fighting alongside British and Canadian units, most likely an effort to keep Terry Allen away from all the other United States generals. Once Terry gets in France, his first order of business is to go to the graveside of one of his best friends, Teddy Roosevelt Jr., the only general to land in the first wave of D-Day, who would pass away
Damn.
just 6 days later from a heart attack and be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. And after that, Terry Allen is pissed and goes on an absolute tear through the enemy. Shortly after the British and the Canadians witnessed the Timberwolves in combat operations, Canadian General G.G. Simmons says, and I quote, "Once the Timberwolves got their teeth into the Germans, they showed great dash. The British and Canadian troops on their flanks expressed great admiration for their courage and enthusiasm. When they again meet the Germans, all hell cannot stop the Timberwolves."
Dear
And he was
God.
absolutely correct, because Terry
That's
Allen and the
insane.
Timberwolves fight through northern France. They fight through the Netherlands.
Oh.
They push the Germans back past the Meuse River. They help capture Antwerp. They capture the major industrial city of Stolberg. They run down the German
Nothing in
army,
hell can
liberating
beat the
towns
Timberwolves
left and right.
division.
During the Battle of the Bulge, the last-ditch German Hail Mary of an offensive, they not
Yeah.
only hold their positions, but they contain the Germans on the northern flank. Due to their ability to
God
operate at
damn.
night, the British and the Canadians simply start calling the Timberwolves the Night Fighters. They are so
Makes
impressed by
sense.
Terry Allen and the Timberwolves that Sir Alexander Harold of the British Army calls Terry Allen the best division commander he's seen in 2 world wars. Bear in mind, this is at a time where British and American officers had a rivalry and didn't think very highly of each other at all. From there, the Timberwolves come up on the historic
Goddamn.
German city of Halle. It's this beautiful town that's been there forever, and it is being occupied by German soldiers under the command of Felix von Luckner, the famed Sea Raider from World War I. Terry Allen personally brokers their surrender by basically coming to the negotiating table and telling Luckner, hey, look, this is a really pretty historic city. If you don't surrender now, I'm going to level the whole fucking thing.
Of course he does.
Agrees to surrender to Terry Allen. The Timberwolves then continue to push further inland until they actually run into the Soviet Red Army, at which point Terry Allen takes the patch off of his arm and declares the Soviet commander an honorary Timberwolf, and the Soviet officer does the same to Terry Allen.
That's
and
sweet.
According to legend, they spent that night having a drinking competition, and Terry Allen won. From there, the Timberwolves...
There is actually images of when the Red Army met with American soldiers. It was actually quite heartfelt. We're basically giving each other hugs, happy to see each other. Yeah.
Wolves moved to help seal the Ruhr pocket, cutting off 300,000 German soldiers and ultimately forcing them to surrender before they moved on to liberate a concentration camp. Shortly after that, the Germans would surrender, the Timberwolves was deactivated in July of 1945, and Terry Allen would finally retire in 1946 after achieving his redemption of not only getting fired from his initial job, but taking a year to train another unit, fighting all the way across the European theater, and he still beat Patton into Germany by 4 months. After a lifetime of military service, Terry retired, moved to his wife's hometown in El Paso, Texas, where he became an insurance salesman and was very...
El Paso, really? They probably got a memorial or probably a little museum to him there. Damn.
Active in the veterans community, helping out any and every way that he possibly could. Unfortunately, at the age of 79, Terry would make one final sacrifice for his country. His 38-year-old son, Terry Allen Jr., was killed in combat in Vietnam, and Terry would pass away 2 years later at the age of 81. He is currently buried at Fort Bliss National Cemetery with his wife and his son. And
Makes
that
sense.
is the story of Terry De La Mesa Allen, a.k.a. Terrible Terry, the general that cared more about his subordinates than the opinions of his contemporaries.
Which,
the man
you
who
gotta love him.
legendary war correspondent Ermi Pyle described as the greatest leader of men and the greatest tactical general in the United States Army. And in my opinion, the most gangster general of World War II.
I really
Thank you
wish
for
they taught
watching.
more about
As always,
him.
support the channels, go buy some merch over the Electrician.
Like, we did focus on Patton quite a bit, but I do wish more people knew about him, and I'm glad more people do
Literally
know.
one of the greatest generals in American history, and nobody even knows his name.
Yeah.
Hopefully this video helps with that at least.
Oh, it definitely did, considering there's like, over 1 million views? Almost 2 million? Understandably completely why he would be pissed, considering, well, how he led his men. I'm glad to have learned about him. But what do all of you think about Terrible Terry? I think he was an amazing man, and I'm glad to have learned about him. Anyway, thank you all so much. If you like what we're doing here, please do consider, subscribing, following, liking, commenting, all that nice stuff you do for streamers, or check out my Patreon. And I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.